Hello everybody. It's been a while. Yeah, I can't imagine that too many of you were expecting to see this face pop up, or, well, you can't see my face, but see this voice pop up in your YouTube boxes anytime soon. But yeah, I'm here. I'm back, at least for a little while. I can't promise too much of the future, but like most of you, I imagine you have a lot more time on your hands than you normally would, and I was kind of itching to play some Mons, so I'm back. Yeah, it's been 2 years. I've been totally out of the community, not playing at all. I may have like played a Ranbats game in the library when I was bored of studying every now and then, but aside from that, I haven't played competitive Mons at all. But I was getting the itch to come back, and so I've been messing around on some servers with some speed tours, and I've joined a cool little league called PSEUDO. That's a short league that's 2 games a week for 4 weeks, and then potentially playoffs. And I thought, yeah, this would be a fun thing to do that's low commitment, and yeah, I'm not really sure what to say to patch up any questions that anyone might have had. The last video I uploaded was like week 6 of NPL Season 8, and then I just stopped uploading after that. It's just a combination of being really busy in school and just totally burned out. I was playing in 2 leagues at the time. Both of them were the NPLs. I got to playoffs in both of them, and then I lost to Maddie Brawlick in one NPL and Omega Jolteon in the other, in like the first or second round of playoffs. So nothing really to write home about there, but yeah, I'm back for a little bit. I will try to stop rambling before too long. You'll notice the name change is it says Y now, and that's just kind of what I've been going on Discord. It's not like I'm trying to dupe anybody or like have this be an alt for something else to trick people. I just don't really want to. Decided that I wanted a little change of name. If you keep calling me Merc or something, I don't mind. Go ahead. I'm totally cool with that if people are more comfortable with that, but that's just kind of what I'm gonna be going by for the now. So anyways, let's talk Mons. Yeah, I haven't played competitive Gen 8 pretty much at all before I started picking up some games here and there a couple of weeks ago now. And at first I was like, I found out about the team tour thing. I was like, okay, I just want to play ORAS, and I have no interest in learning Gen 8. And then because I saw like Wi-Fi leagues for Gen 8 and how not fun they looked, but then like learning about the DLC and the national decks and how they actually have the full amount of Mons, and kind of hearing what the metagame was like, I was pretty intrigued. From all accounts, this metagame plays much more like ORAS than it does like Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which is ORAS is my roots. I played draft leagues through all of ORAS, playing in the LBA where I got my start, and then moving on to the GPC where I kind of got my name out more, and that was kind of the bridge that got me into the NPL and kind of into the quote-unquote limelight, you could say, of draft leagues, the small community that it is. But anyways, thinking about what I would want to draft in a league, I kind of was drawn more towards the things that might work better in ORAS, kind of, which I think was, even though I had more kind of success in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, just Sun and Moon really, because I was a pretty seasoned vet at that time, I really felt like I enjoyed myself more in ORAS leagues. That might just be nostalgia talking to me, but just kind of how my draft and play style is. Sun and Moon was a really tough learning curve for me. I remember that. Like the first 2 seasons in NPL, I just did not do well because my drafts just did not work and like all that stuff. And there was just so much power creep with the Z moves, and I couldn't really run the kind of fat balanced teams that I more prefer to use. So yeah, that's just kind of the background of how I was heading into this draft. So I talked about the league. This is PSEUDO, the Garchomp division. There's 3 divisions. There's Garchomp, Tyranitar, and Hydreigon. Garchomp is the allegedly highest and most competitive division out of the 3, so that should be fun. Looking forward to getting some good competition and seeing if I still got it in a full-blown league. So anyways, there's 12 guys in this, or 12 people in this draft pool, and I had the number 6 overall pick, so that was a pretty decent spot to have. Either like kind of being dead in the middle like this, or being with either the first or last pick so I can get those wheels. But being in the middle is not too bad because you're pretty guaranteed to get a solid mon each and every round, which after the first couple it's only really important for the first few rounds when you're trying to like build your core, and afterwards you can you draft stuff to really just flesh your team out more and to patch any holes and to get all of your types and that sort of thing in line. So yeah, that was kind of where I was at. I was 6th overall. The inspiration behind this team was, I don't know if any of you, I'm sure most of you remember who like Zazo is. He had a Gen 6 ORS team which he won. I don't remember what that league was, but the one where he got beat by Chimpact that one week. He had that like Jirachi Licky double wish pass team with a bunch of bulky wall breakers. That was kind of the initial kind of, what should I say, the inspiration for this draft going into it, though it kind of went in a different direction. I'm still cool with it. It should be a fun team. So anyways, let's start talking about the draft itself. I've been talking for probably like 10 minutes now. Yeah, the 6th overall pick, there were some pretty good mons in this league that were allowed, and I knew I was going to get something good. You know, there's stuff like Mega Mawile that's allowed, Aegislash. That's about it. Landorus Eye was banned. That's something that's been allowed in some leagues, but not in this one. There was no Libero Cinderace either, so the top picks were like Torrentee, Tapu Koko, and Dragapult, and like Darmanitan Galar, which I'm not sure how good that thing's going to be. I heard John W. talking about it. It's like, yeah, it's just like you're paying 18 points for just a huge wall breaker. It's like you're paying 4 points more for basically like a Dracovish, which I thought was kind of interesting. But as you can see, I ended up with, you can see my draft, but so I started out with Zygarde. This was an 18 pointer. We had 120 points. I think I can remember my point totals. And yeah, it was really either between this or Lando T for me. I honestly kind of wanted Lando T more, but I've really enjoyed using Zygarde, and without hidden powers in this gen, Zygarde could be just insane because it's so good already. I never used it in an official league, but I used it in a couple of tournaments and just in like mock battles and all sorts of things, and I love using this thing. It's really nice. Like spamming 1,000 arrows is like, you typically don't need coverage moves on this thing because it's just so good with that one move, and it has lots of setup. It's got some really cool niche options. Unfortunately, Camouflage, which is probably one of my favorite little techs that I used on this thing before, is no longer. It was one of those moves that was cut, so I can't use that, much to my dismay. But there's lots of things it can do. It's super bulky. Like as you can see, its stats are just insane. Its ability is worthless. I can't use Power Construct, and there's no Yveltal or Xerneas to cancel out that thing. So yeah, ability's worthless, but it's a really good mon with lots of coverage options. And 1,000 arrows, it's just crazy. And without hidden power ice for random mons to potentially threaten it, now I know which mons can actually hurt this thing without having to play the guessing game of, is this thing going to be carrying hidden power ice? Because now I can see, oh, does this thing get ice punch? Does it get ice shard or ice beam or whatever? Does it get ice coverage is a more concise way to say that. And it's so fat that it can just, even if it does take a super effective hit from like a fairy or dragon, it can still eat that because its defenses are just insane. And having Zygarde on the team gives me a good win condition and a good thing that can just sponge a lot of hits and blanket check a lot of another team. So I thought it was a really good start to draft around. And going into the second round, I was kind of hoping that like Clefable would drop because that like wish teleport stuff that it gets now is just ridiculous. But I figured it probably wouldn't because Clefable goes really early nowadays, kind of more similarly to how it went in ORAS drafts. But I got Jirachi round 2, and I really wanted Jirachi. This was really kind of the thing that I most certainly wanted that would benefit my team well. And like everyone knows what Jirachi does. It's just, it does everything. It does a ton of different things. It has so many coverage moves. It got a few more interesting options. It gets Baton Pass now, which doesn't do anything, but like Ancient Power, or not Ancient Power, Aura Sphere's a cool tech. You get Encore now, which is pretty nice, so it can break down like stall setup things a little better. It gets like Stored Power as things that are new, this Steel Beam move, which is pretty strong. Aside from that, it's pretty much the same mon it always has been, and which is just a really solid mon that does a whole lot of things. It gives me a Stealth Rocker, it gives me a bulky Wish Passer, it gives me an offensive threat. If I really need it, I can bring the cheesy like Scarfed Iron Head spam set or like a T-Wave Iron Head set just to try and get some hacks in my favor. But I'm typically not too big a fan of just like spamming Scarfed Iron Head. It just doesn't fit how I like to team build and all of that, but that's not saying I won't ever use it because it's definitely a viable option. But yeah, this thing gives me the Steel to my Fairy Dragon Core. I don't know what the new school kind of thinking is, but I kind of just wanted to check off the regular boxes that teams have. I want to have good speed tiers, I want to have some good hazard setters, a grounded poison type, I want to get my Fire, Water, Grass and my Fairy Dragon Steel and get a good Mega and all that sort of thing. Kind of going into this, there was only 3 mons that I knew I wanted to have from the beginning, and that was Jirachi, Licky Licky, and Megahera. Since the beginning of when I started getting into this gen, I was like, oh, there's no hidden power. Well, Megahera just sounds a little more insane now, because I've been a Megahera stan since like 2017 probably, when I used it in a March Madness Token Minorities tournament, and that thing was just insane back in ORAS. And now without HP flying for randos to threaten it, same thing with Zygarde. Now you know which mons get coverage to hit it. So that was kind of the team to be able to pass Fat Wishes to like really strong bulky ground, either Zygarde or Lando, and then to like Megahera and then other breakers on the team as well. So yeah, Jirachi was the big part of that core. It's super versatile. I think it might get shoehorned a little bit into a couple specific roles on this team, just because of some shortcomings on my draft, but I can kind of talk about those at the end maybe. Anyways, next I got in the 3rd round Rotom Heat. Now this thing is I don't know if you've heard about this item called the boots. I'm sure you have, but they're broken. They block Stealth Rock, which is insane. So now Rotom Heat suddenly is like good in draft. I was never a fan of this thing in Draft League. People got it all the time, but this thing really got a whole lot better. It's got it with the 2 additions of getting the boots and having Nasty Plot. Now this thing is an offensive threat. It becomes a legitimate defensive pivot, kind of on the same level as Rotom Wash, and like Rotom Wash, it also has a potential to be an offensive threat. And like the combination of Nasty Plot with Electric plus Overheat is really strong. There's not a whole ton of things that resist that. It does lose out a little bit not having hidden power, so stuff like a Swampert or Seismitoad or any of those water ground types can wall this thing pretty easily, and for the most part any ground type, well, any ground types that resist fire are going to wall this thing. But it's super nice. It gives me a defogger. Yeah, the heavy duty boots are just super duper nice to give me something to pivot into a lot of the metagame. This is something that can blanket check a whole lot of mons just because of its typing and ability. And with that all said, it just gives me something that also really benefits from Wish support, because it's got this low HP stat and really high defenses. It gets a whole lot of health back from a Wish, and it can continue to threaten things throughout the game. So I don't have to rely on like rest sets or using Pain Split to keep myself healthy all of the time if I am running more of a Wish Pass dependent squad. So I got this thing as the 3rd round. I don't really remember what was around. I saw this thing and I was like, hey, this mon's supposed to be super duper good now, like incredibly good. It was only 14 points, the same amount. It was either between this or like Thundurus T, which Thundy T is amazing, but kind of knowing where my draft was heading, wanting to build around the Mega Hera, I figured Rotom Heat was going to be better overall to kind of support that thing, since it takes on it Mega Hera's weaknesses better, and it gives me that better reliable bulky pivot that can also set up and be threatening. Though if I was going for a more offensive approach, I think Thundy T would have been a very good option as well. So anyways, moving on to the 4th round, I saw that Weavile was around. Weavile's price has decreased a bit because it loses Pursuit this gen since it got cut, which is unfortunate because I really enjoy having Pursuit. It's pretty often a staple of the teams I draft, but it was pointed out that Weavile, even though it doesn't get the Pursuit, it's still a really good mon. Like, it's super fast, it has a great offensive typing, it benefits from getting the boots. It got a couple of new coverage options, which are pretty nice to have. And like, even though, yeah, it can't Pursuit trap anything anymore, you weren't drafting Weavile just to get Pursuit. I used this thing in, I think it was either ICBA or that other, it was the NPCC, that's what I had it in. And I've used Sneasel a bunch as well, and these mons are just that spamming an offensive stab knockoff is just such a treat to have. It does so much damage, and getting rid of items in draft format is such a huge thing. It's so good to have a solid pool of mons that can use knockoff on your team, because items are such a valuable part of draft, especially now that I think Boots is one addition, and also Eviolite. NFEs have always been prevalent, but I think there's been kind of an increase in seeing more NFEs used, so being able to get rid of items, especially pressuring things that rely on like the Boots or Eviolite to be bulky and tough to kill, is a really nice way to chip teams down, because this team is definitely built around chipping and breaking, and then having something that can kind of sweep in at the end. So Weavile can serve both as a breaker and as a sweeper, depending on the matchup, and it's just a threatening mon that you have to account for when you're building. And with the state of the metagame, as far as I'm aware, what I've heard is that Psychic and Ghost types just kind of run around crazy nowadays, and so having something that can be a good offensive check to those is really nice to have, as well as having my defensive checks like my Jirachi, and then even to a point like Rotom and Zygarde can take those hits, and like a fair bit of my team can take on Psychic types pretty well just by natural bulk, but this thing does give me a good offensive check to the faster ones, and of course I have Mega Hera, and this thing does synergize very well with Heracross and Zygarde, since now that HP Ice is no longer a thing. Bulky grass types they're already more hard pressed to deal with Zygarde, but they're still a good answer or a good check to Zygarde. But this thing and Hera both really pressure Zygarde's counters, and they're all tentatively checked by the same kind of bulky mons of grass and, well, not grass, but fairy types all want to switch in on these things. And so we can, ideally there's offensive synergy here that can break down mons that would try and switch into Zygarde, Weavile, and Heracross, as well as some of my other mons. So I really like the offensive synergy on this team. It's pretty frail, a little frailer than I would have wanted it to be from my initial vision of it, but Weavile was a really nice mon to add to the team that I'm excited to use again. Next up in round 5, I got Tapu Fini. I've used this thing a little bit, I'm pretty sure. Probably just in like speed drafts and stuff, but like, it's a Fini, you know what it does. It's a really solid pivot. It can be a wall, it has enough offensive presence to where it's not passive. It's a great stall breaker with Taunt and Nature's Madness and that sort of thing. Gets knockoff, which is a really nice tool to have. And setting up Misty Surge and getting the Misty Terrain is really nice for this team, where a lot of my mons would suffer pretty heavily from Toxic. I think one of the main strategies of breaking down stuff like Licky and Rotom, and especially Zygarde, is to get a Toxic on him. So hopefully this will kind of dissuade my opponents a little bit from bringing a Toxic and that sort of thing in prep, which makes my Zygarde a little more dangerous. Of course, there's a little bit of discordance because of Misty Terrain, reducing the Dragon type stab that my Zygarde could run, which is useful in some matchups. But like I said, most of the time I'm going to be clicking 1,000 Arrows with Zygarde, so it's not too big of a deal. I like the synergy continued. Also, I just avoid status, like Jirachi doesn't like being burned or parried. Obviously, Rotom doesn't like being parried. This makes Weavile an offensive switch into Scald if I have Terrain up, which is pretty nice, so I can threaten some things, because Scald is always a problem to switch into. I definitely wanted some things that could deal with that, and of course Tapu Fini is a great Scald switch in. And yeah, this is a mon that it checks quite a bit of the metagame. It definitely benefits from having Wish Passer since it has the high defenses and okay HP and no reliable recovery. I saw that in the DLC moves they got, it now can learn Rest, which just why? Why would you learn Rest? I'm not going to be running Telepathy Fini unless who knows? I don't even think that move's legal, but I digress. This added a lot of really nice types to my team. I lacked both a Fairy and a Water, and that accomplished both. I was kind of in the air between this Primarina and Azumarill. Getting Azumarill would have been a little more true to the kind of Zazo bulky offense double wish archetype that I was going for, but I just really couldn't, based on the state of my team, I really couldn't pass up on getting Fini here because it offered a much better defensive backbone and giving me another defogger, because I didn't want to rely solely on Rotom to defog since it likes having as many moves to be pesky as possible. So this gives me more defensive options, so I think having Azumarill on this team would have also been very good, and I could have changed up my strategy. So next, at this point in the draft, I was kind of sweating. I was like, oh, I have one Stealth Rocker, and I don't have a Poison type. And my team was pretty slow, aside from Weavile. So I was just kind of, I was trying to do some roll compression here. There was several things that I wanted, and I landed on Nihilego as my next pick. I think this has a lot of potential. It suffers a little bit from losing hidden power, so now that Steel types kind of have its number, but it can still hit pretty decently hard with its coverage. But what Nihilego gives me, it gives me a grounded poison type so that I'm not like instantly 6-0'd by toxic spike teams, and I can also set up my own T-spikes. It gives me a Stealth Rocker, and just kind of thinking about how Stealth Rockers work, this could very well be a good offensive Stealth Rocker because Nihilego does force a lot of switches, which gives you the opportunity to get Stealth Rocks up. Its coverage is great. It can hit pretty much anything. It's got some cool status options. It has Beast Boost, of course, which is a really, good ability. And it has the potential to get a Beast Boost in 3 different stats. I don't think Spadef is that useful, but you can EV your Nihilego to get either a special attack or a speed boost upon getting a kill, which is a really nice thing to have. So this just offered me some good rolls on my team. Obviously, it's really frail on the physical side, which is unfortunate. So it can't be as reliable as a Wish receiver, but it does have that great special defense stat, and it gives me another good Fairy check, which is something that's important when your main offensive threats are both weak to Fairy. Although I'm not super afraid of Fairy, but it's good to just have more and more checks, and this just checks a couple more boxes on my team. I also could have probably gone for a Nido here, which would have been very useful. I was really up in the air between whether I wanted to get... At this point, I believe Nidoking was available, so I could have either gotten this or Nidoking, or maybe it was gone already, but before this pick, I was up in the air, waffling back and forth between the two. But I decided that the speed that Nihilego offers, giving me something that's above that base 100, which I really needed. Something between Weavile's 125 and Jirachi's 100 was important to have because I do value my speed tiers. So just having this thing around as a speed tier kind of pushed it over the edge as opposed to Nidoking. For me, though, Nidoking still would have been very good and a really scary mono team. I might have had to just adjust the draft down the line a little bit so I could make sure that my speed tiers weren't too bogus, So anyways, I got this thing. I like it. I think it should be a pretty good mon on the team. I don't think it's going to be the best mon. I don't think it's going to come every week, but it's something that you have to account for in prep. and depending on the matchup, it could just kind of go in. You never know. So anyways, moving on to round 7 now. I knew I wanted to get my Licky Licky. I really couldn't afford to get this thing sniped, even if it looks like it's early. It's pretty incredible. Looking back from where Licky Licky started, I remember in ORAS leagues, this thing was like 4 or 5 points normally. But it's just gotten so well recognized now as something that in draft it far outshines its usability in Smogon tiers, where it's like a PU mon, I'm pretty sure, that might sometimes get used in NU. But in Draft League, it's just recognized as an excellent wish passer with the combination of having Oblivious, really good coverage, setup options, and being able to pass those fat wishes off a 110 HP stat. This thing's really nice. Everyone knows it's a really nice mon. Yeah, it would have been really nice if this thing got teleport. If it got teleport, I think it would kind of push it over the edge into being like, it might have been like worth over 10 points at that point. I paid 9 points for this thing. So my Zygarde was 18, Jirachi was 16, Rodent was 14, Weavile 14, 15, Nihilego was 12, and this was 9. So I was kind of running down on my points, and after I was just trying to figure out what combination of Mons plus Heracross would get me a solid team without going over my budget. But yeah, Licky, it offers that second half of the Wish Core. It gives me a really nice just blob that's not totally passive. Its offenses are decent. It has ways to phase out Mons. It has setup, so it's not totally vulnerable. I'd imagine that probably it's not all that much better than Blissey is at this point. In past gens, I definitely would have taken this 100% of the time over like a Blissey or a Chansey, but with the advent of Teleport and like, I think it's maybe Body Press or Store Power or whatever, there's a little more reason to use like a Blissey or a Chansey, but it's not as bad as it used to be because now they have Teleport. But I still like this thing because it gives me that versatility. It can be used as an offensive threat, but more often it's going to be a bulky backbone to my team with Wish to support all of my mons. So this thing, you know, it's a Licky Licky. It's great for what it does. Definitely not the value pick that it used to be, but I definitely saw it as something that was really worth having on my team. So anyways, going into the last 3, I was just trying to patch up some holes and get things that would support the rest of my team. I knew that I wanted another rocker. I wanted another way to get rid of hazards. I wanted a way to get up spikes and potentially T-spikes as well. And yeah, and a grass type. Those were the roles that I wanted to achieve. So I next got Claydol. Claydol really intrigues me this gen. Claydol's been memed on since like the dawn of time that it's garbage and all of that, but I'm intrigued by the thing. It's got the solid defenses. It gets rapid spin. Its typing's pretty good. It gives me an Edgequake resist, which is a nice thing to have. And it gives me a decently reliable Stealth Rocker. It gives me something with rapid spin, so I don't have to fully rely on Defog. And it gets Teleport now, or maybe it always got it, but now Teleport is a move, which gives you that negative priority momentum, which is so huge on a team like this that lets me bring in either my breakers or my sweepers that don't want to take a hit, and it allows me to keep up the momentum. Also, it's one of the many walls that was a beneficiary of getting Body Press. It also gets Nasty Plot, which I can't imagine that I'll try to bring a sweeper Claydol all too often, but the options there. It gets Trick Room, and one person pointed out, like, yeah, Trick Room Teleport is a really nice combination, especially for like Mega Hera, and anything else that I could potentially try and bring to abuse Trick Room. Though my team is relatively fast, and most of my slow ones aren't that strong right off the bat, though you could potentially like cheese out some kind of set that would work. Yeah, again, it's a role filling mon. It's not something that's going to come every week. It's not going to be the star of this team. I don't think that I'll have to use it as a crutch to rely on too often to get a Brock, since I do have Jirachi and Nihilego to set them up. I don't love the idea of having to run Rocks Jirachi a lot of times. That's one of the big restraints that my draft puts on my team, is that Jirachi is the mon that like comes to pretty much every game, and Nihilego and Claydol are much more matchup dependent, so more often than not I fear I'm going to have to either run Rocks on Jirachi or perhaps forego having Stealth Rocks on my team, which isn't super helpful given how I want this team to play out. So that's a bummer, but I do think it'll work well enough, and this gives me another mon as an option. Having a second ground type isn't that big of a deal because my team's not very ice weak. My team's very non-ice weak, as a matter of fact, so it's not too big an issue, and I don't care too much for Scald either. So moving on to my second to last pick, the penultimate pick, I knew I wanted my grass type, and the trend from what I've picked up is grass types kind of aren't that good anymore for the most part. There's still some solid ones, but with the loss of hidden power, a lot of the grass types in general just kind of lost their value as a high price kind of mon. Like, I guess Shaman is one of the things that really lost out. I don't think it's one of the worst things ever, as some people would allege, but either way, getting a low tier kind of NFE Eviolite abuser is sort of the move nowadays, and I'm trying to stay hip and cool with all the youth. So I got Roselia. I played around with this thing a little bit in some speed tours and stuff, which isn't always the most conducive to how the meta works, but it's, you know, a relatively bulky grass. Once you have that Eviolite on there, it has enough strength in that 100 special attack stat where it's not necessarily passive. It gives me spikes and toxic spikes. Another grounded poison type, so it makes it takes the pressure off of Nihilego to come against stealth T-Spike teams a little bit. Though again, this is another mon that's matchup dependent, so I'll really have to. It'll definitely have its time to shine because it's pretty bulky once you get that Eviolite on there, and it fulfills some pretty good roles on this team. So I think it should be all right as a bulky grass. It was, on these last three picks between Claydol, Roselia, and Hera, I was really kind of pulling my hair and trying to figure out what's the best combination of basically of 8 points plus Mega Heracross. After the Licky pick, I had 22 points. I knew 14 of those had to go to Mega Hera. So I had to find a combination of 2 or 3 low tier mons that would fulfill the roles that I wanted for 8 points. And I came down that Roselia and Claydol was probably the best option that I could think of, though there's definitely some other options that could have worked. One thing in particular that I noticed was Froggedier's 1 point, and Froggedier as a 1-pointer is pretty crazy because I'm pretty sure that Protean is allowed, and that thing is just kind of wild. Just had a sip of my LaCroix. Anyways, yeah, Roserade gives me a grass type. It's bulky. Scald switch in. Natural Cure is nice. I don't imagine that Poison Point would be used over Natural Cure anytime, and Leaf Guard is like never gonna get used. But this thing, it's neat. And of course, last but not least, is my Mega Heracross, the mon that I wanted to use from the very beginning. And it's just one of those mons that like people just sleep on Mega Hera so much, or they just don't think about drafting it. So I find very often that you can get away with getting Mega Hera super late, if not at the very end of a draft. And like, you know what this thing does. It's got that big 185 attack stat with really good defenses. It's just like, it is the definition of a tank destroyer, big wreck, kill everything guy. So yeah, this gives me the wall breaker that my team really wanted and needed. It deals with stuff that Weavile and Zygarde are checked by. So like I was talking about, the offensive synergy between especially my 3 physical attackers here, but also with Nihilego and like Rotom and Jirachi, I really enjoy the offensive synergy that they provide, and also the defensive synergy. I believe that I drafted enough checks to all the things that Hera doesn't like: Flying, Psychic, Fairy. I can deal with those offensively and defensively pretty well. This thing really likes having Finny around so that I don't get threatened by like Burn or Para or whatever. And having the Wish passes into this thing is really nice because unless there's a team that's just absurdly bulky, getting in Heracross generally means you're just kind of if you get it in for free, if you find the right opportunity, it just like nets you a kill, or at least a really heavy chunk off of an opponent's team. So anyways, it also gets spikes now, so that's pretty nice. Gives me a secondary spiker to Roselia, or maybe Roselia is a secondary spiker to Mega Hera. And given how much Heracross forces switches, that could be a very nice thing, though generally just throwing out attacks with this thing and doing 50 to 100% of your opponent's health is generally preferable, but it definitely has its time and place. So yeah, that's the team. I think it's pretty fun. There's definitely some flaws in there. I don't like how restrictive my stealth rocking is. I wish I got a better one. I definitely could have taken this in a different direction with like getting Mamoswine and Azumarill instead of like Weavile and Tapu Fini, and getting something else instead of Nihilego, but I think the team's pretty solid. I think it should be fun to use. I just have to kind of figure out what's the best way to prep with it, and as long as my plays are somewhat okay, I think I should be able to pull out some dubs, maybe make playoffs, maybe even win the league. Who knows? We'll see. Yeah, the future is very uncertain. I don't know how much or how long I'll be uploading for, but I can guarantee you that I'm here right now. Yeah, thank you so much for watching if you tuned in. Yeah, if you want to help me get to 1,000 subs so I can get ad revenue and make money, you feel free to do that. But yeah, whatever. Have a great day, everyone. Hopefully I'll see you tuning in to some more vids from me. I'll catch you later. Peace out.